Right, welcome. I think we're ready to get started. So the session today is about how you operate a hybrid environment with hybrid link mode and content library. So before we get started, how many people are familiar, attended sessions on VMware Cloud on AWS here? Okay, so a bunch of you. How many people heard about something called hybrid link mode? Hybrid linked mode, yes? Okay. So we'll be spending some time digging deeper into the details of this. I'll give you a bit also of the background, why we are actually doing that work and why it's different than some of the stuff that we currently have. To get started, this presentation may contain some future references and future things that we're working on. So please bear in mind that features and work that we're talking about is subject to change. There are no commitments as per the disclaimer here. In terms of the agenda, we'll quickly talk about hybrid cloud management and some of the things that it enables and allows us to do. And we'll also get into how hybrid link mode addresses these use cases and how we've actually designed it to address those and get into more of the configuration aspects of it. So I'll walk you actually step by step through the flow that we have designed to allow you to link a cloud environment, a VMware Cloud on AWS, to your on-premises vCenter environment. Okay, so we'll do that today. And then we'll switch into my colleague, Roman. He's going to talk about hybrid cloud content management and how we take content and we manage it across on-premise and cloud. We'll also talk about how you do bulk content onboarding if you have a bulk content on-premise that you want to onboard on the cloud. Okay? And we'll wrap it up with some Q&A in the end. Please keep note of every question that you have. We'll be more than happy to address all those. We'll stick around also at the end if you have additional questions. So just to introduce ourselves, so, my colleague is Roman Konarev. Roman is a product manager in the vSphere team, and he focuses primarily on content library as well as a feature that you're all familiar with called vSphere HA. And my name is Samah Zakari, and I'm a product line manager in vSphere team. I focus on core vCenter platform features such as availability, scalability, hybridity. That's kind of the scope that we have. So let's start with talking about hybrid cloud management. If you think about public cloud, we talk to a lot of our customers, and a lot of the use cases that we hear from customers are around, I want to have a solution that allows me to do DR between my on-premise and the public cloud. I want to have some dev test workloads in the cloud, perhaps bring production back on-premise, keep production on-premise while doing dev test in the cloud. Some seasonalities, in some cases I have some burst capacity. I don't want to over-provision for that. In other cases, I'm growing, I want to expand my reach, want to get into different regions that I haven't had the presence before, and I don't want to invest necessarily in building my own data center there. And in some other cases, it's, you know what, my lease is coming up, my data center lease is coming up, and I don't want to renew that. And I want to completely get out of the data center business. And if you look at all of these use cases, you will realize that in order to achieve them, you will need a hybrid cloud management platform that allows you to seamlessly address all of these, whether it's DR, whether it's migrations of workloads back and forth, whether it's even day-to-day operations across the on-premise and the cloud environment. Now, if we think about the VMware Cloud on AWS offering and what we're doing with hybrid link mode, you will realize that we're just simplifying this to the point that it is just another vCenter that happens to live in the cloud. It is the same vCenter that you've gotten to know and use for the years, right? Same interface, same APIs, same tool set. It's literally the same management experience that gives you a true native hybrid cloud management platform across on-premise and the public cloud. Now, how does that look like? So for those of you that are familiar and those of you that have not seen the VMware Cloud on AWS offering, it is primarily our SDDC stack, comprehensive of vSphere, vSAN, and NSX, that runs on the AWS global infrastructure. And the management platform for this continues to be vCenter. So your endpoint of management is vCenter server. Now, if you think about your on-premise environment, you still have that same, your data center, but the same vCenter management endpoint. And the effort that we're doing with hybrid link mode is to link those two vCenters. In essence, extend that management plane to cover on-premise and the cloud. And when we do that, you end up with a unified management interface that exposes your on-premise vCenter as well as the cloud vCenter, right? Once we've done that, things like those use cases that we just talked about in terms of I want to now migrate workloads, I want to put dev test in the cloud, bring it later on-premise, I want to take some content and move it, all of that becomes seamless because it's basically a migration of a VM the same way you've been doing it all along, right? So I just go to on-premise vCenter, take that VM, migrate it to the cloud, and vice versa. Now, some of you might be familiar with a feature that we have called enhanced linked mode. In other places called M by N. It's a topology that we have with external platform services controller. Can I see a quick show of hands how many people are familiar with enhanced linked mode? Okay, so pretty much the majority of people. A quick recap, it's primarily a topology that is available since vSphere 6.0. As you deploy a new vCenter, you choose to join an existing single sign-on domain that is defined with an external platform services controller. And by doing that, you get into that topology that I just showed you, right? The single unified management across these vCenters. Just by the very fact that you deploy that vCenter in that single sign-on domain, you become part of that environment. Benefits are you share licensing, certificates, tagging, as well as single sign-on across all of these vCenters. So you could think that, for VMware, it could have been a very simple problem to solve, hybrid cloud management. Just establish enhanced link mode between that vCenter on-premise, a vCenter in the cloud, get single sign-on, sharing all of that information, and I get that unified management solution. But the reality is it's a much bigger challenge and problem than that, which actually got us to develop that new technology that we reference as a hybrid link mode because of a lot of architectural differences that are fundamental between these two architectures. One is the on-premise and cloud vCenters are by definition in different single sign-on domains, right? You've deployed already an on-premise vCenter in its own single sign-on. We deploy one in the cloud, so your on-premise is vSphere.local, right? Ours in the cloud is VMC.local. It's a different one. We deploy it at different times, right? It's running different versions. So one thing about enhanced link mode had to be the same versions. We're expected to be revving and updating our bits in the cloud much, much faster than your typical upgrade cycles on-premise. And so we don't expect you to keep upgrading on-premise as much as we want it, but we realize that that's also a challenge. So versions are different. Topologies could also be different. The enhanced link mode that I just showed you required an external platform services controller, right? But you may have an external platform services controller on-premise, an external PSC topology, or a vCenter with an embedded PSC. In fact, we're running actually on VMC with an embedded, on VMware Cloud with an embedded PSC. And so now we need to actually come up with a different mechanism, not to have a dependency on that external common component, the platform services controller, to enable sharing of data across these. The second challenge is different users now need not have access to all the environments. So in this example, I have a VMware maintenance employee that is doing maintenance and upgrades on the cloud vCenter. Now, I trust that you don't want that VMware employee to access your on-premise vCenter, right? His sole role is to update and maintain that environment in the cloud. If I think about also your own users, or yourselves, right, as you access that environment, you may have different roles in these different environments. In fact, initially, we're giving you a cloud administrator role in the cloud, right? On-premise, you still have full administrator privileges, but in the cloud is a restricted set of privileges. And so while I bring those vCenters together, while you manage them from the same view, you still have a different role as you access each vCenter, and you still have a different set of things that you can do across these two vCenters. Additional differences include global permissions. Licensing is different. We've announced our pricing yesterday, so you can check that. But it's completely different technology and architecture than what you've seen with enhanced link mode. So let's walk through how you would configure this enhanced link mode. Hybrid link mode, my bad. So I'm starting with a view into what we refer to as the VMware Cloud on AWS console. So that's, that's our VMC console, and this is where you start on VMware Cloud on AWS to provision and deploy a new SDDC. Now, the reason this is already a pre-deployed SDDC. As you can see, I'm on the network tab. And the reason I'm trying to bring that up is I want to highlight a couple of prerequisites that you need to be able to configure hybrid link mode. So if you want to link that cloud environment to on-premise, the first thing is you need to establish VPN connectivity between the cloud and on-premise. It's an L3 VPN, and we expose that configuration from within the console. The other thing that you need is firewall rules that allow the vCenter running on the SDDC side, in the cloud side, to reach out over the VPN tunnel to get to your on-premise vCenter. So you'll have a firewall rule that says vCenter should be able to talk to anybody outside. Obviously, you need to do the same thing on-premise. You need to open, and we specify the ports that are needed for hybrid link mode connectivity. So it's vCenter, Platform Services Controller, access to LDAP, as well as DNS access. So these are the ports that you'd also need to open on-premise. And the last thing that I just mentioned is DNS. So as part of hybrid link mode configuration, you will see that we need to add Active Directory to that cloud vCenter, and we need to also link to your on-premise vCenter based on its name. So we need to have DNS to be able to resolve the on-premise vCenter name. So once we've done that, you can navigate from the network tab to the connection info on the console again, and this gives you the information about how you log into the cloud vCenter. Credentials, these are the default credentials that we provide. Notice that this is a cloud admin at vmc.local, so it's its own, again, single sign-on domain. And we randomize a password for each SDDC deployment. So now, once you go to the H5 client, which, by the way, is the only client supported on the VMware Cloud on AWS, you will use that cloud admin credential to log in. So again, I'm logged in as cloud admin. I keep referencing that a couple of times because this will change. So just note that for now. As you log in, you see your SDDC. It's a single cluster here. I have 6 hosts within that configuration. And then if I wanted to link that vCenter on the cloud to my on-premise vCenter, I will navigate through menu to administration, and you will see that there is a new setting that we call hybrid cloud, under which linked domains is exposed. Through linked domains, we walk you through a very prescriptive 3-step process to configure hybrid link mode. Excuse me. The first step is to add an identity source. Now let's think about that. I'm logged in as a cloud admin, but eventually there should be a user at customer.com, right? A user from your Active Directory that should have access to both environments, on-premise and cloud. Otherwise, how can any single user see both in the same plane? So the first thing that we do is we actually add your AD, right? And we support AD over LDAP or Open LDAP, and we add that to the cloud vCenter. This should be very familiar. It's the exact same process of adding an identity source to a vCenter today. Once this is added, user at customer.com is available, but he doesn't yet have any permissions on that vCenter in the cloud. So the next step in our process is to select a group of users, so that's an AD group, based on that identity source that you just added, and grant that group what we call a cloud admin role. And so we're granting this rule, think of it as a global permission. It's it's a little bit more than that, but it's primarily taking a group and saying any user that is a member of that group should be granted cloud admin permissions in that environment. So now, just to think about it for a second, let's say this group that you chose was administrators on-premise. Now you made that group cloud admins in the cloud. So when you log in with any one user from that group, post-linkage, you would have full administrator privileges on the on-premise vCenter, cloud admin privileges on the cloud vCenter. Make sense? So once we've added the cloud admin group, the next step is to effectively link to the vCenter on-premise. And as you would expect, Primarily, we take your vCenter information on-premise. Again, if you're using FQDNs, remember this is why we need your on-premise DNS. In the console, this was the prerequisite I highlighted. Basically, the SSO credentials, vCenter information, and once you hit link, we go through a process. Takes typically about 30 seconds, give or take. It depends on the size of your inventory. It could be slightly longer if you have a large vCenter. And what we're doing during this time is a very cool technology actually behind the scenes. We're effectively establishing trust between the on-premise and the cloud vCenter. So we exchange some certificates, and we establish that trust so that initially the cloud vCenter trusts the on-premise vCenter. We're taking a very conservative approach, saying we're going to control things from the cloud side. The on-premises vCenter does not have to trust the cloud, right? It does have to trust a couple of things that allows us to talk to it, but we're not establishing full trust with that on-premise vCenter. We're establishing the trust in the other way. We're also syncing what we call lookup services that allows us to locate those vCenters on-premise. In addition, we also sync tagging information. So all of your tags and categories that you had defined get synced from the on-premise environment to the cloud. The reason we do that is we want to ensure that as you get to migrate workloads between on-premises and cloud, if you had associated some metadata in terms of tags to those workloads, they get retained in the cloud environment. Once the linkage is complete, then it will tell you that the two environments, the domain that you're trying to link has been linked. And it will prompt you to log out. And the reason it does that is, remember, you're logged in as a cloud admin that does not have any permissions on the on-premises environment. He's a local single sign-on user in the cloud vCenter. I need to log out and log back in as a user that has access to both, which now is a user that initially had access on-premise. That's obviously a default given. And also a user that is a member of the group that I just granted permissions on the cloud vCenter. Right? So I'll proceed to log out. And you'll notice that I'm now logging in as a join user at bma.local. So that's a kind of a fictitious company here. This is a user that was a member of the join admins 80 group that I had specified. Okay. Log in with my credentials. And you log in, you'll be able to navigate to hosts and clusters. And you'll be able to see the inventory combined between your on-premises vCenter and the cloud. Cool? Nice? You guys like it? This is not easy, by the way. This is a lot of work. I remember when we first started working on this project, we actually literally built a slide that was just, it was like an illustrative slide. It wasn't a product, right? And this was thought initially as a very, very hard problem to solve, and primarily because we're trying to link two domains that effectively are separate. Whereas in enhanced link mode, it was actually saying these are the single domain, right? This is the single thing. All of the users are shared, all of the permissions are shared, all of the roles are shared, tagging, certificates, everything was shared. In this case, we're trying to link environments to enable better operational, seamless hybrid cloud management, while at the same time maintaining the administrative separation that a user in the cloud does not necessarily have to access on-premise and vice versa. You control that. You choose which group of users gets that type of access and privilege. Okay? So we're seeing both vCenters, and as I mentioned, it now opens a lot of use cases that you can think about. Once these are linked, it's another vCenter. You'll go to the cloud side, you'll see there is a on that vCenter, this is the cloud vCenter. You see, it's the single cluster that we had initially with the 6 hosts. And then you'll see that there is a compute resource pool and a management resource pool. Since we're operating that environment as a service, we are actually controlling our management VMs within that pool. Hence, you don't have access and permissions on that pool, because that's how we run our operations. But you are given full access to that compute resource pool. This is where you deploy your workloads, right? On the cloud side, on the on-premise side, I have that tiny core VM that is available that I can take and migrate between on-premise and the cloud. Right. So with that, do we have a couple of minutes to do questions now and then maybe switch to the content library?
If it's...
Do you guys prefer that we do some hybrid link mode questions now and do content library after, or do you prefer to finish the whole presentation and then do the questions? Presentation? Let's do that. Right, so I'm gone. We'll switch now to talk about hybrid content management, and we'll talk about content onboarding as well.
Thank you, Sameh. How's it going so far? Good? Okay, great. Thank you very much, and thank you for coming. Congratulations. Why? Well, you've just learned how to use hybrid link mode, and this is one of the newest and coolest and very useful technologies. And actually, you're about to learn, well, actually not only learn, add to your hybrid arsenal a couple of more tools. And let me just explain. We use a lot of hybrid, a lot of management, a lot of cloud words. So hybrid content management, what are we trying to achieve here, right? The task is very simple. As Sameh explained, you have your on-premises, you have your cloud, and you want to bring your content from on-prem to the cloud, right? And when I say content, I mean anything but VMs, right? And it's templates, ISO images, scripts, and any other files that you actually need to build VMs in the cloud, right? And obviously, you know that there is not a big gap, or there is just a tiny step between VM and VM template, right? With that, I hope the task we're trying to achieve is clear. So let's just move on. And first tool is content library. And I would like to ask, how many of you have actually tried content libraries? Say aye. Okay. How many of you are familiar and know what it does and understand the basics? Say aye. Okay, so I need to give some overview then. So in our specific, and let's actually look at content libraries to address our specific use case, right? So bringing things from on-premise to the cloud, right? So in content libraries, we have this concept we call publish, and subscribe. And also, so what that means is that on the source side, on the source VC, you create the published library. You add your content, templates, ISO files into that library. Then you go on to the destination side, which is going to be the cloud in our case. And you create a subscribe library and link those two. The sync will happen, the data transfer will happen, and eventually in subscribe library, which is in your cloud, you'll have your content sitting. And then you will deploy, create the VMs out of templates or mount ISOs in the cloud, right? That's in a nutshell how it's going to work. So here, or is it? Anyway, so we are starting where we left off. So we have this single pane of glass where at the top you have your on-premises vCenter. At the bottom you have your cloud vCenter. So as I explained, we have to have two libraries in both ends to be able to move the content, or not move, actually, copy content. So at top, you see I created published library. And it's worth to mention that actually when you create the library, it's local to a vCenter. And the beauty of what we have right now, the beauty of actually hybrid link mode, is that from the drop-down, you could actually pick any of vCenters you want to. So and in my case, obviously, for published library, so on-prem is my source. So for published library, I pick on-prem vCenter. And the other thing is, for my subscribed library, I pick my cloud vCenter. That's the destination, right? So creating published library is very simple. And you could see it starts with the same screen, with the only difference. So for published library, you just say, I create a local library, and you publish it, and it's done. It's very simple. You define that step, you pick the storage, finish, it's done. And as a result, what you get the URL, and that URL actually points to a JSON file. And JSON file is just a description of your library and your items that you have in that library. So we got that one, right? So the second step is you just add content to the library. And in my case, I've actually added, as far as I remember, 4 templates and 2 ISO images, just for demo purposes. And you're done with publisher, right? It's very simple, straightforward. That's literally like 3 steps. The steps are the same. For subscribe library, which you actually build on the source, on the destination side in your cloud, that's also very simple. So you say, I would like to create subscribe library. You give it a URL, and obviously the URL that you took from your publisher, right? And I just cut it, but you see that it's .json. That's exactly points to the description of the library. And there are 2 options that you could pick. By default, it will create a library, and it will say download all the content immediately. And what that means, that means exactly what it says. Once you created a subscribe library and pointed to your publisher, it will immediately start the download, and all your content, all your templates and ISOs will be downloaded and stored locally, in our case, in the cloud, right? And the content is ready to go. The only caveat is obviously, especially if you have many templates or ISO images and they're heavy, it's going to take some time, right? So, and for different reasons, you might postpone spending that time. And in that case, you would pick option download the content when needed. And when needed means so what will happen, so the similarly sync will start, but the sync will not download the data. It will just download all the metadata. So basically, on the other end, let's move on. On the other end, you will just see, so you see the templates, right? And you see, so for ISOs and other types, they're stored in other types tab. And you might have noticed that the 3rd column, stored content locally, says no. That's exactly what it is. So only metadata has been synced and available in your cloud, right? So, and it's actually it's instantaneous, right? So you have the description of your library in the cloud without spending any time of actually downloading anything. And why is that useful? Well, in many cases, actually, imagine if you have many files, ISOs, templates, anything else, and you are actually creating the infrastructure. You're basically building a channel, and you actually want to provide your maybe end customers and users this, in a way, library of content, right? But you don't really want to download everything and spend all this time. You're just building the infrastructure. And the other thing is, so I have 4 of them, right? But maybe my end users will start slow and will use one template today, the second template in 5 days, etc., etc. So you got the idea, right? So sometimes there is no reason to store anything and sync everything and spend the time and the bandwidth right away. And that's exactly when this option is extremely useful. The same applies, by the way, for ISO files as well. So to leverage fully that option, and I spend a lot of time talking about that, and the reason is it's extremely powerful option. It might look very small, but if you really deal with a lot of content on a daily basis, and you actually want to optimize either for bandwidth or for storage or just for different reasons, that's exactly how you do that, right? And we have a couple of instruments for you to do. So the first one, at the top, on the left, you see at the library level, we have synchronize button, right? And what it actually does, it doesn't download all the content. It actually checks and see if there is new content available on the publisher and if the metadata has been changed. And it will update the descriptions, names, or if new things were added, it will just add a new item. And the way I leverage it is is if either I forget what happened on my publisher, or I changed something, or somebody added new content on my publisher, I just click and check if and what refresh shows me, right? If new items have appeared or the previous items have changed descriptions. However, that's just the beginning, right? The next step is for any item, and in my case, I selected Ubuntu 16. I could actually synchronize that item, and synchronize meaning in that case download the content locally, right? That's exactly what happened on the final screen. You see for Ubuntu 16, the stored content locally says yes. So that content is actually now local to your vCenter. And this is actually Cloud vCenter, right? And obviously, that's exactly what you want to achieve when you plan to use content, right? So if you want to create a VM out of a template, you want that template to be local. You don't want to go through network for deploying the VM, right? At the same time, once you've done that for different templates, and let's say, like for my Ubuntu 16, I've downloaded that, and maybe I created VM, and I don't need it for a while, I could just go and say delete that content, and it's not going to delete the item, so it will still preserve the item, either for your later uses or just for information. But at the same time, it will not be stored locally, so you don't have to consume storage in the cloud. So continuing. So once the content is local, so what you obviously want to do is to consume the content, right? Otherwise, it's totally useless. And the same way as you do for VM templates right now from VC inventory and folders, you just deploy, we call it deploy, but usually it's just, we call it deploy, instantiate, or create a new VM from a template. And it's almost identical wizard to what you actually currently use for templates in the folders, right? A couple of things to mention. First is you see customize the operating system. So that's a new thing that we added in 6.5. And obviously it's available in the cloud as well. And this is the consumption for the templates, right? So remember I also had my couple of ISO files added to my library, right? And I also sync them. And the other thing that we've added in 6.5 and also available for you for your content consumption is you're able now to actually mount your ISOs directly from content library. So you see, right, we used to have client device and data store only options, but now there is another option, the content library ISO file. And it's very straightforward and simple. You just click it, and it will show you the list of ISO files that you have in your libraries. So in my case, just one library, right? So 2 ISO files. So it will list whatever you have. And obviously, you have to understand that it will mount only items that you have access to, right? The same way it works for data store. So nothing new actually here. In addition, just improving the usability. And for people who actually used to use content library before, we didn't have that option, so you would have to go into a data store and search for that ISO mount. That was not the ideal scenario, right? Is it good so far? You guys following? Okay, perfect. So this is everything about content consumption. The one thing is worth to mention is that, so I did manually sync the content, right? But you don't have to do that. If you try to create a new template from, I apologize, a new VM from a template that doesn't have content stored locally, and you finish the wizard and you say, let's do that. So the first step that will actually happen is the content download. So it will be triggered. So you don't actually have to do anything manually. The question here is, especially if you have end users creating new VMs, so where is time spent, right? And like if it's somebody else, so if you're just responsible for kind of establishing infrastructure, you should tell your end users that the first step will take longer. Well, the first step will be download, and it will take as much as required to download that content, right? So they are not surprised, and they're not complaining why it's taking that long, and it used to be much faster, right? Because the download is happening right now. That's why you might differentiate, and you might, for some users, you might download the content. For others, you might say, okay, it will take as much as it will take. You just wait, right? The same for ISOs, the same for templates. So another important thing we also wanted to highlight, we're not going to drill down into all the parameters, but in content libraries, we actually have many configuration properties that you could use and adjust. We obviously recommend you go there only once you have tried content libraries and you see a need to actually polish and adjust something for your specific needs. But if you go to administration, system configuration services, and you will be able to see 3 content library services, content library transfer service and OVF service. And each one of those has a list of properties that you could adjust, and there are some defaults that we defined and believe should be good in general, but obviously you could adjust all of that, right? And just a couple of things I wanted to highlight. So not highlight 4 things to highlight, 2 things to talk about, right? So it's maximum concurrent transfers and maximum number of so basically the property that would allow you to limit the concurrent transfers that you have. And keep in mind, so this is done on the publisher side, because that's what happens, right? So you have your publisher, and it will just distribute the content. In our case, it's simple, just one VC to one VC, but in general, it could be many clouds, right? So many vCenters with subscribed libraries. So you want to protect your publisher, right? And that's exactly how you do it. You restrict either the number of concurrent transfers, and it's also it's more granular. So you could restrict not only overall number but also specific NFC transfers. And I think since I have a little bit time, I'll just say so. In content libraries, and it's actually very relevant to hybrid link mode that we've discussed. So in content libraries, we could transfer the data over HTTPS, or we could transfer the data over NFC, network file copy, right? And NFC, as you know, works between hosts, so that's the most efficient way for data transfer. And it actually only applies for VMDKs, but that's the main content, right? And in that case, the NFC, once the data goes between hosts, so you could limit the NFC transfers as well, right? Overall, so and we say that 8 is, so for NFC it would be lower than overall. For 20, I would say 20 is a good number at least to start with for overall number of transfers, right? Another important one is bandwidth control, right? So many of you actually asked about possibility to control the bandwidth, to limit the bandwidth for content libraries. You could do that, and that is exactly the place you go. So you see the maximum bandwidth consumption. By default, it's 0. That means there is no limitations, but you could define that number as any way you want to. And that will also help you to protect your publisher, right? Especially if you have many subscribed libraries. And with that, I would like to talk about another tool. Since remember, I promised 2 things. So content library is the main one, and the beauty of content libraries, you already have it, right? So it's been introduced in 6. You don't have to do anything, just use it, right? And another thing is, you've seen the screenshots. It's a beautiful H5 client. It's very fast and it's very nice, right? It's a huge improvement as well. So another tool I would like to talk about, and that tool is specific when you actually when you do bulk onboarding into the cloud, right? So you might start slowly, and that's how actually from our discussions, most of you will start. You'll start slowly and like throw a couple of templates, couple of ISOs, create VMs, mount ISOs. But then eventually, at some point, you would like to like bring all your libraries of content, right, to the cloud. And in that case, we actually we realized that in content library we have some improvements to do for bulk selection. And we wanted to fill the gap and introduce that specific tool. It's a standalone tool. It's a Java application. It's actually doesn't even require any installation. You either just throw it on your laptop or any machine running in either on premises or in the cloud or actually anywhere, with the only requirement that it has to have access to on-prem and your cloud, right? Because the tool will actually orchestrate the workflows, orchestrate the onboarding for you. And here just, we'll talk a little bit more in details next slide, but just to kind of highlight two things. So you see, so we have OVFs and scripts at the top. So those things we go through content libraries. And just for people, maybe it's worth to mention, so for people who are not familiar with content libraries, so in content libraries, when actually VM is cloned to a library as a template, or your regular template is cloned to a library, it becomes OVF. And that's the content at the moment we deal with, right? We're obviously investing more and investigating other content types, etc. But at the moment, that's what we deal, right? You could throw any type of content, but in terms of templates, we operate with OVF templates. So for regular VM templates, so the tool actually could leverage another path through NFC to bring your templates without actually conversion to OVFs. And it actually does everything automatically. As a matter of fact, let's just move to another slide. So just some highlights of what it does. As I said, the tool is actually an orchestrator, so it automates everything for you. You actually don't have to know much or anything about content libraries or even about cold vMotion APIs. So the tool leverages actually existing APIs for you. And it allows you to bulk select your content. So it discovers all VM templates that you have in your inventories. It gives you a way to, I don't know if you are able to see, and it actually wasn't meant for you to read, just kind of give you a screenshot. But it will give you a list of templates that you want to onboard, and you will be able to select any ranges, any templates you want to. The other thing is you could also add, you could also create a folder in a data store and throw into that folder any type of content. And obvious ones would be ISO images, right? And the tool will use this folder as a parameter, and will just look into folder as well to pick it up for onboarding purposes. Another thing is mentioned, so everything is automated, so you literally just have to start the tool and it will just select the content and it will take care of anything. The other thing is it will detect if you have VPN, and obviously for hybrid link mode, the VPN is required, right? And in general, that's our recommendation, right? And I'm sure you will go with VPN, but just in case then VPN is not available, Content Onboarding Assistant will actually detect that situation, and this will switch to the workflow that does not require VPN, but still will do the job for you, right? And again, resumability, right? So if you do everything manually, there is no tracking. So if something fails, you have to track it on yourself. Obviously, if you have a lot of content, then you just would like to organize this tracking somehow, right? So the Content Onboarding Assistant will actually remember which files, which content has already been onboarded, and if something fails, you just restart it and you just resume it where you left off, right? So the workflow is very straightforward. I just place it here just to give you an idea what is actually happening behind the scenes. But as a matter of fact, you don't really have to know anything. It checks the connectivity for you. So you start the tool, it checks the connectivity, it creates libraries when necessary, automatically on both ends. So for content selection, as I said before, so you have your folder where you store your ISO, scripts, or any other files. And you also have auto-discovery for your VM templates. So you just select those two. So you're done. Then you just run the tool. So it will transfer the content, and eventually the content is ready for you to be consumed in the cloud. And the consumption is, again, it's either you will receive your VM templates, then you know exactly what to do with it. Or if you receive content in content libraries, that's exactly the steps I described a couple of slides before. You create a new VM out of template in content library, and you mount an ISO directly from a library. And that is it. So yeah, I have to mention, so you see the screenshot. So this is a command line tool, and obviously the reason is there is no purpose to invest in UI where you actually don't have to look into that UI, right? So it's very straightforward. And we have, once you get your VMware Cloud on AWS, SDDC, you're going to get all the documentation, so there is a clear explanation on how to use it. You'll get the link where to download the tool. So it's part of the package. So you will have it as easily as content libraries, right? And that actually concludes our presentation. And we'd like to thank you very much. And we will open for questions.
So for questions, please, if you don't mind just coming to the mic in the middle, this is being recorded, and it would be good that, that we have it in the recording as well.
When you copy the
Can you come
templates,
closer?
when you copy the templates to the content library, does it allow you to go up and update your original template?
So so I'm trying to, okay. Once you add, so the workflow is the following. So if you've added, you had a VM, you clone it as a template in the library. Then what you want to achieve is you want to update that template.
Yeah, like patching.
So there is no, there is a way how to, not within content libraries, you cannot do that, right? But however, if you have updated version and you want to preserve that specific library item, so you could reload new content into the same library item. Yeah, that's available.
So you will end up with versioning.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Hi. Can you use hybrid linked mode without AWS to connect to disparate vCenter instances, maybe through an acquisition or something like that with the new version?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. In fact, it's a topic that has been coming up quite often. So hybrid link mode, so actually, since some of you are still in the room, can we see a show of hands of who's interested in that? Again, the question is, okay, people got the question already, linking on-premise environments with hybrid link mode. I'll ask a second question, which is, what's your goal? Are you trying to consolidate two separate SSO domains into one? Or are you actually trying to achieve what we've talked about, which is maintaining separation, but still managing?
In my case, it'd be taking maybe two large environments that were separated for one reason or another and trying to get them into one pane of glass without having to rip all the vCenters out from underneath, or the hosts from underneath, and reconfiguring, just getting them into
And every user in that case should be able to access everything. It's okay, right?
That would be nice.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think, and I hear both. I think you also mentioned you actually want the separation. So I think I hear both use cases, and it's interesting because one aspect is really an aspect of saying, I don't want to use that SSO anymore. I want to use that existing SSO that my other VCs are using, and I want to become a member of that existing single sign-on, leverage all the benefits and permissions of that environment, right? So that's one view, which is actually the most common use case that I've heard about. The other use case, which is, I want to do something like hybrid link mode. I want to maintain separation. There are some users here that should not access there, right? And at the same time, I want to have a hybrid admin that is able to manage across the two vCenters. That also keeps coming up. So to answer your question, in the first incarnation of hybrid linked mode, our focus was between on-premise and cloud and 2 VMware Cloud on AWS. So that's the initial focus, right? We're developing to that. Obviously, we'll be extending that in the future, right? It's, our goals is to make this a platform type of capability that can be extended beyond that point. The one thing I'll highlight also so that you get a little bit more understanding of why that's not the case today. As I said, we established trust between on-premise and cloud. In fact, if you think about it, it's a unidirectional syncing of data. It's unidirectional trust. We want to make sure that information is exposed to the cloud vCenter through which you are managing the hybrid environment. Effectively, if you go to your on-premise vCenter, you still see the single on-premise vCenter. You don't see the cloud, right? And so with that said, that feature, the way it is today, would not seamlessly allow you to enable 2 vCenters coming together, which has to be bidirectional, has to be both of them joining and being able to exchange information. So I note the request. Like I said, it's coming up, but it keeps coming up in discussions. So we'll keep track of that and we'll start pushing it.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome. Can I, before you guys leave, can I also ask another question? How many folks are happy with being able to manage cloud and on-premise from the cloud side? From the cloud side. So the flow that I showed you today was managing both on-premise and cloud from the cloud side. How many people prefer to manage the cloud from on-premise side? Like go into the on-premise vCenter and be able to see the cloud. So that was your question?
That actually leads into my question. We're a heavy VRA user.
Okay.
Would you add the cloud side, if you are going to do it in hybrid link mode, which we would probably do just for manageability, within VRA, would we add them as 2 separate endpoints, or would it be a better idea to just add the cloud one so you can manage it? I was thinking the other way. I'd rather have the on-premise one be my primary that understands the cloud components.
Got it. So I think your view into this is VRA is on-premise. It adds my on-premise vCenter. I want to have that on-premise vCenter be the endpoint that VRA talks to, through which it gets to the cloud. The flow today is you're adding both from VRA. You're adding on-premise and cloud from VRA, right? And VRA sees 2 independent vCenters and it manages them.
Has that actually been tested?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Because I can see it doing the inventory search on the cloud one and finding dual UUIDs for the... We've run into that with even enhanced link mode on-site kind of behaviors where if you have an enhanced 2 vCenters that are enhanced link mode, when it does and we added both of them, which is what we were told to do initially. Now you're not supposed to do that anymore. When it did the inventory lookup for both, it found conflicting UUIDs between the 2 of them and just said, well, okay, I'm not going to update the information for that set of VMs. And when somebody did something on the vCenter without going through VRA, it was entertaining.
So I'll tell you, just in full honesty, VRA is tested with hybrid link mode. I know it does work. I know there are no issues. But to that specific point, just let me confirm whether we add just the cloud endpoint or we individually add each one, just to make sure that I'm not giving you any wrong information. We'll double check on that. I'll give you my card and we can follow up on that offline.
Any other questions?
All right. Well, thanks for coming by.
Thank you very much.
Hope you enjoyed the session.